What I want to focus on today is the idea of mental projection and how it affects everything that we do. We don't realize how impactful it is on our lives until we start to kind of really dissect what's going on in terms of our own mental dialogue. And then the next layer of that would be our verbal dialogue. And then what augments our verbal dialogue, so would be the dialogue that we have with others. So I want to break that down and have you understand how that actually affects the quantum field and affects the kind of level of success you're seeing, the level of joy and happiness in your life. And then I'm going to go through the 12 elements of projection. Now that I just picked that number arbitrarily because I didn't want to write 40 levels of projection. So there's definitely probably more than that, but it will kind of be a good thing for us to just kind of go through my kind of top 12 this evening. So when we think of projection, what I mean by that, so you understand exactly what I'm talking about, is the stories that we create within our mind. So we all can kind of, recognize that verbal chatter that's continually going on throughout our day. It's like that little voice inside your head. It's nagging you to do things. It's reminding you to do things. It'll criticize you. Sometimes it tells you you're awesome. And sometimes it'll be out there criticizing other people, events, whatever it's doing, okay? That's kind of our feedback tape in terms of where we are spiritually. Not the only marker, but it is a good indicator of really where we're sitting. So actually, there's a lot of spiritual teachers out there that will teach about turning it off and going into the silence. And I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. Silence and that blissful state where you're not interacting with your little verbal friend inside your head is also extremely peaceful. But it is a tool that we've been given, and when we understand how to use it and utilize it properly, our whole world begins to transform, okay? So the first layer that I'm going to talk about is just that conversation you're continually having with yourself. That conversation is extremely powerful, and it is how we communicate with the quantum field. It's basically how we are letting our reality know what we're expecting of it, what we want to create. So again, through these 12 principles, I'm going to go really, deep into how to dissect that. The second level of utilizing the word or utilizing our internal word, because even if you go back to some of the biblical teachings, we talk about the word and the word being very, very powerful. And what that means is that the word is our vibration, okay? It's our vibrational calibration with the quantum field. We speak English, so we understand the English language. But again, if you were to hear another language that you don't understand, it kind of will register as vibrational gibberish to you, right? It's just kind of a bunch of tonalities that don't make any sense. So we understand English, but to another language, again, it's just tonalities in terms of the way that we're understanding what's coming out, right? And tonalities are also extremely important. So when we start talking aloud, okay, and we're just having a dialogue with ourselves, and I'm somebody that will, talk to myself too, if I'm in the house and I've got stuff to do, I'll start pointing out like verbally out loud what I've got to do, okay, and that augments what's going on in the quantum field kind of another level when it's spoken, when it's actually vibrationally coming out of you. Now, the last level of that augmentation that can happen, well, actually there's two levels beyond that. The third level is when you're interacting with others and you're sharing that vibrational frequency and you're interacting with that vibrational frequency, okay? So that's sort of that third level, and it's going to, again, the vibrations or the reverberations from dialogue that is interpersonal between various beings is going to have a greater effect on the quantum field. Now, if you get into public speaking, okay, whether you're Hitler or whether you're Oprah, that's sort of that fourth level I'm talking about. When you have a collective consciousness and you're affecting multiple minds and you are utilizing your word in a mass projection, that would be calibrated at the highest form of kind of allowing your energy out into the quantum field. Okay, so at least here on Earth, that's what we're going to kind of focus on, is those four main categories. Now, the secret sauce to this, of course, is that we want to keep all dialogue absolutely positive, inspirational, and upbeat all the time, if possible. We all know that that's very difficult to do. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, you know, what's going to come out or what's going to be internally, right? And so the goal is to be training yourself to control the mental dialogue. And all that mental dialogue is it's a way that your soul can read out. It's kind of like a little machine that's teaching you what your vibrational equivalent is in the moment. So when we really understand how to utilize the word, it can be incredibly powerful for us, and it can be incredibly powerful in terms of transforming our lives, okay? So the first kind of truth, and I didn't want to say step, but I've called them truths in this document. Of course, the document is going to be on your portals as well. So you guys will have login access. Don't worry about it. I've made a lot of notes on there that are going to be a little bit more in depth than maybe that I go through in the actual lecture. So feel free to read them and go over it. We're filming these, so you can always go over it again as you're practicing. Now, really understanding that your worth is not determined by your status or what you are producing or where you are in life. One of the key things that we make a huge mistake about internally and externally, we do this as a projection that we're projecting out. We project it onto others, but we basically are misinterpreting the value of everything in its totality. So when we start to really deduce our own worthiness to our output, what we can create, where we're at, what we drive, the house we're in, the clothes we wear, we are actually really in a state of distortion, okay? Another level of that is when we are basically creating status evaluations on others. So both of those. We have to come to a calm sort of equilibrium where we know we are infinitely valuable, and so is every other life force on Earth, okay? There's no hierarchy, there's no one is above the other. We have to recalibrate our thinking so that we understand, and not just understand, but that we absolutely know within ourselves that we are enough, and not just enough, that we are incredible. And when we come to that realization inside that we are just incredible beings, and then we start to recognize that absolutely everyone else that's in our field and beyond into infinity are so valuable and so beautiful, we start to have a calm within ourselves. That franticness that we're used to kind of trailing over continually, almost like a feedback loop in our brain, starts to dissolve. Because most of our problems are actually coming from improper programming. So an improper mental dialogue, which is spilling over into an improper dialogue with all of the different beings that we're interacting with. Okay? And so then what happens is that it's vibrating back and forth, and we're exchanging this energy, and the more distorted we are, so when I talk about distortions, I want you to understand in terms of vibrational levels. So the greater the distortion in your mental patterning, the lower the vibrational pattern that you're going to be emitting, in terms of, like, if you were to look at it at a scientific level. The higher you're calibrating in terms of your thought forms, the more, first of all, beautiful your reality will become, but also the more lovely your thoughts that you're emitting. So there's a direct correlation to all these things. So why does this matter to us? It matters to us because we all want to be happy. We all want to live our highest potentiality in life. And nobody's ever taught us, per se, how to utilize our brains and our bodies properly. We just kind of get thrown into this body and hopefully you make it. It's kind of a sink or swim thing. So again, each and every one of these principles, hopefully as you integrate them, well, not hopefully, I guarantee as you integrate them, you'll see the most beautiful, unexplainable transformations in your life, and it will happen very quickly. So usually at the beginning, when you start to transform your thinking, synchronicities, just amazing kind of what I'd like to call them miracles, because of course this is a course in miracles, but really, really interesting things will start to happen, and you'll have these, pinch me moments, like, is this really happening? And you're gonna start seeing these more and more and more. And what you've got to realize is that as much as, yes, it is the external world you're experiencing, what you're really experiencing is a reflection of the level of distortion within yourself. So as those distortions become less, you're going to see the reality that's projected from your own being becoming very, very cohesive, and it will flow. You'll just be entering a flow state in terms of your life. Now, the second really important truth in terms of your projections is not jumping to conclusions. So a lot of times when we are trying to map out reality or go throughout our day, from a survival standpoint and throughout our history, even down to the more primitive life forms, due to survival, we have had to make conclusions. We've had to come to quick conclusions in order to survive. Now we're kind of at that stage where you have to understand, in terms of planet Earth, we're at the top of the food chain, essentially. We don't have any predators. We're no longer in that sense where we really have to worry about survival. So now it's our task to go beyond that form of thinking and think beyond that precipice of just survival thinking. But we still have that old programming running in our brain. And that's where we tend to jump to conclusions, or we make snap decisions without very much information. And I would say probably 80% of the time, the conclusions we come to are wrong. And then what happens with that projection, it's such a great distortion that we start to project that outward. And then the more that, again, it's that ripple effect. So if we share that improper distortion along the path with other people that we interact with, that vibrates out and it compounds itself. So when we're looking at our projections and what we really want to rein in terms of our own mental dialogue, is not jumping to conclusions. It's better to actually say nothing, internally as well as externally, if we don't know enough information. So I know only from past experience that when I would feel like I didn't have control of things, I would run a tape of replaying those events in my mind and getting very frustrated with them. That was what was going on internally. And then a way to kind of ease that internal pain would be to go to somebody else and regurgitate that and have them almost back up or buffer the distortion I was creating. And I realized that that was creating a lot of sort of chaos as I was, spitting out this misinformation. Now, it was a very youthful mistake. It's what we all go through. It's not anything that I'm now self-critical about. It is just that focal point where I can now, turn my attention to that and say, okay, this isn't helping me. I don't need to jump to this conclusion, and I don't have enough pieces. I don't need to replay it in my mind. I just need to settle within myself, trust in, I use the word God. For me, that's a word that works, okay? But that's not, it doesn't need to be that word. If for you, if it's Gaia, if it's the universe, if it's, whatever it is out there, the source, you have that field of intelligent infinity that you're going to reach out to, and you're going to trust that it created all of this that we are experiencing right now. I didn't create this, you didn't create this. Something else that has the ability to hold this entire matrix together knows where the ship is sailing. So I've come to a point where I can let go. I don't have to sit there and spin things in my mind. And when you let go of holding those bungee cords of the quantum field so tight that it can't flow for you, miracles start to happen. So again, in terms of your projection, just start to pay attention to your mental dialogue. Be double diligent about the dialogue you have with others. It's okay to be silently blissful. You know, if there's a group of people and they're creating chaos in terms of their words and they're stirring things up, you can stay silently blissful. You can smile at them, you can love them in where they are for what they're doing. You do not have to get involved, okay? Sometimes we misunderstand love for involvement, okay? Just because you are in a group and everybody's gossiping, it doesn't actually give you a love vibration. It takes your vibration down. So sometimes pulling yourself away from that vortex is so powerful in transforming your life. It gives you that quietness so you can really go into the core of your being and figure out what your life's mission is and what your purpose is. So sometimes that silence and that alone time is extremely powerful, and be okay with it. Learn to be okay with it, because right now, part of your learning is you are in this little pod of a body that is a tool that you get to utilize for a short span of time. In the whole enormity of eternity, our lifetimes are a nanosecond, so don't worry about it. It seems long, it's not. It happens like that. So be very grateful that you're in this little learning pod and take every advantage of it. Okay? The third truth that I really want to go over is our projections that people are not as critical as we think they are. Okay? So often we have this projection that the world is against us, that people think we're fat, people think we are stupid, people think we are not successful. I mean, the list goes on and on of the miserable things we are projecting onto our external reality that aren't accurate. I would say that most people actually think you're pretty amazing. And actually a lot of times other people in their little body pods are quite intimidated of others in their separate little pods. They don't necessarily know how to articulate social interactions to a deep level, okay? That's something that doesn't happen, especially in our modern era, very often. So that depth of communication, is very, very essential to your spiritual growth, is really having those deep conversations with people and those deep interactions. And when I say deep, I mean, you know, you're really getting to the core of things, but there's no external attachments. They're not paying you for the service. You're not getting anything from them. There's no existential benefits to them. It is just mano a mano, two individuals coming together and having an authentic moment where they care about each other. And hopefully, when you create that point of caring continues on and on and on. And as the experience grows, the depth of that relationship just expands and expands and expands as the layers get built, okay? And those are the type of connections that you want to invest in and that you want to build your life around. And I would say as well that, you know, the most valuable thing that you will gain from your experience here are the individuals and the lives that you will connect with. That's the only extension when we leave this plane that continues on. Our success, what we build here, what we create in terms of a company, it does not extend. All of that material stuff gets left behind. So you have to be, or you at least should be paying somewhat attention to those relationships that you're creating, because that is the soul connection that once this is past will continue on and will help you at the next stages, okay? So again, don't assume that others are seeing you in a bad light. That's a very negative projection to be putting out there into the quantum field. Even if you find yourself or somebody has had a negative comment against you, they can simply just be having a bad day. Don't attach your energy to it and spin it out of control. Just let it go. They said something offside, or they did something a little offside. There's a million reasons why people act out, are frustrated, whatever it is. Forgive them in the moment and let it go. Now, if they are a serial, repeater of this kind of behavior, you have to have boundaries, obviously, because again, they can affect your energy as well. But what I mean by boundaries is, let's assume you have somebody in your life that is using drugs, okay? Obviously something that's very, very chaotic. It's a very low vibrational energy. You have to have boundaries because that person will literally suck you down into that lower vibrational cavern. But you don't attach any judgment or hatred or frustration to that individual. You simply love them and let them go because they have lessons to learn. It is what it is. You can't save them. You can't save anybody. The only person you can save is yourself. And when you save yourself, you are demonstrating through your own light how others can follow you. You become the pathway, you become the light. You have to be very, very understanding of that principle because it is matched and paired with grace and humility. When you pair your own self-healing with grace and humility, that's that 3-point axis where it comes together and it creates basically that balance, okay? But if you have just healed yourself and then all of a sudden all you're doing is appearing in your ego and, bragging and trying to take your energy over others, it's a complete imbalance and the whole thing will topple over and you start right back at square one. So really understanding that everything always has to be in balance as we progress. The fourth truth or the principle in terms of fixing your own projection is refraining from categorization of any type. This is extremely high level projection mastery, okay? So we have trained our brains our entire lives to categorize everything, from our education systems to our social systems to our family systems. We have been taught from a young baby to put everything in categories and to create hierarchies and, this person's the best on the sports team and that person's the best and the worst and whatever it is. We have to unlearn that. It's really a disservice to the actual systems in the universe because everything in the universe is in balance. There is no hierarchy. Okay, so when we start to align our own thinking with the actual truths and the principles whereby everything is structured, we come into alignment and then again, we become part of that flow state. So making sure that we're not categorizing ourselves. So not putting ourselves on any type of hierarchy, not blocking ourselves in, because again, when you put something in a category, what are you doing? You're drawing a box around it. You're preventing it from becoming all it can be. So take the sides away from the boxes and just practice this state of no labeling, no categories. The same thing for your external world. Don't categorize anything and don't label it. And again, this is a very, very high level principle. It's not something you're going to be able to do immediately. But you can start to watch yourself and catch yourself doing these little kind of categorization, kind of mental dialogue, and then catch that and kind of stop it before it runs away on you, okay? I've gotten very good at it. So from where I am now in terms of my own evolution, I really attach not very much energy to too many things. So for example, like today I was running late. 5 years ago, I would have had so much negative mental energy following me into this room because of everything I would have attached to the fact that I was 1 minute prior to when I was supposed to be here. And everything turned out just fine. But I would have been not able to speak about my notes. I would have been frantic. My energy would have been all over the place. And I probably would have not given the best of myself. So again, just allowing, that non-attachment, I guess is a good word in terms of how you're interacting with your life. Now, when I'm talking about non-attachment, I don't mean that you don't care, because the caring part and the opening up of your heart becomes like 10 times, 100 times as wide. You care more, but not in a way that is going to drag you down, just in a way that you love every moment for all that it is. And you, again, begin to trust the universe, and you begin to trust the source that created the universe. And if there was a reason you were running a little bit late, maybe it was because if you had been early, something else would have happened, okay? So everything has its divine timing, and just letting go of the reins and learning how to trust God's timing. We're okay. And when you really meditate on that and really deeply in every cell of your body learn this and start to understand it, it will almost bring you to tears how protected you are at every moment, how loved you are at every moment. And when you can start to feel that, and you let the barriers that you have built, you have to understand you built those barriers. God never placed those barriers between himself and you. And I'm saying himself because, again, that's the language that we have used for so many years, okay? God is not a masculine guy sitting up in the stars with a big staff and a white beard, okay? It's an energy in the field that is all loving. It's light. It is everything that is illuminating, that creates life. Life is the extension of love. We are the extension of love, but we've cut ourselves off to it. And so then when we create those barriers because of our improper thinking, when our minds are not calibrating correctly, we perceive ourselves as separate, and we perceive ourselves as alone and detached from love. And that's sort of the basis of all of our problems, all of our loneliness, all of our searching and seeking, and the 100 different directions that we go that really don't lead us home. And the whole purpose of all of this is to lead us home. That's where we're going. That's the destination. And the highest point of that destination is that we're going home together. So once you get to a certain point where you've settled your own being, then it becomes your job to help lead others home. You become that light that leads, not in an egotistical way, not I'm the one, in a humble way, so that you show others that they are equally capable of leading those that they can help home. Maybe it is your job in this lifetime to only take your family and lead them to that safe harbor. Maybe it is your goal in this lifetime to lead far more many people. Only you know that, and only you can decide within your heart where that barometer sits. But it's extremely important that we put that dialogue into each and every day when we're getting up in the morning, when we go to bed, that we understand our purpose here. The fifth principle that I want to talk about in terms of our projections and our mental calibrations is negativity of any kind. We all will fall into snags. Even today, I had a ton of customer service issues. I had a lot of things that were coming at me where out there in the quantum field and reality, there was some upset people. And I had to deal with the tidal waves of their energy. So I did hit a low point where, again, when you have multiple things going on, and all I did was I went into my little space and I meditated for 5 minutes and I let go of it. I stopped. I understood that this is a nanosecond in terms of everything that's going on, and I shut that negative energy down. But with that, when you're kind of in a state of chaos where you're not controlling your projections at all, you will have a very, very negative effect on your own world, but on the world at large. And you will bump into other people and hurt them. So when, again, it ends up having worse effects on your own life than those you bump into. And the faster we can learn this, the faster we move away from some of those sort of low-lying energies. But the least negativity that you can be transmitting at any given time is your highest purpose, with all factors taken into account. So understanding that there is non-judgment and there's only love for each and every one of us. So what I mean by that is there are going to be times when you're not transmitting bliss and everything perfect. But do your best. Do your best to at least pay attention to your thoughts and make them as beautiful as possible. Pay attention to your actions and your words and your deeds and make them as beautiful as possible, considering things. I mean, if somebody is coming after you with an axe, there's only so much you can do, right? So your actions might not be the highest calibration that you're, capable of if you're on a beach in Hawaii, okay? But always defer to the high road and always hold yourself accountable. You are your own accountability barometer. So when you not demand of yourself, but when you quietly ask yourself to always do your best, that's the point at any given time that we should be operating from. Okay. The sixth kind of truth that I want to talk about, and I kind of just touched on it, was only you can truly facilitate your own corrections. In terms of our projections and our distortions and our mental programming, which eventually creates the reality that we see, it's only us that can fix that. We cannot defer the blame outside. Even though we may be experiencing external events that seem cascading and seem to be ripping our lives apart or whatever, could it be a divorce, a bankruptcy, maybe it's a death of a loved one. Yes, it seems like it's the external force that is affecting us, but the challenge and the mission for us here is to learn to control and to balance our own inner being. That's why we're here. And it's going to manifest in a billion trillion different ways because there's so many of us, and no one's journey is the same as another's journey. Okay? So don't want to hop into somebody else's life either. It's not designed for you. It's not the best fit for your plan, for your soul. What has been designed for you has been designed eloquently to fit the map and the adjustments that your soul needs. And I'm going to tell you another secret. You designed it. Not just on your own, but you had input before you came here and incarnated here. You had input on what you needed. So it wasn't that you were just thrown into the deep end and somebody is cosmically up there laughing at you, floundering around. This is a plan for your life that was designed to help you achieve a higher state of evolution. And the reason that we only experience reality the way that we do right now is because it is facilitating growth. Once we hit a certain precipice where we can understand reality beyond the scope of the three-dimensional world that we're experiencing now, that we will start to experience. I only know that because I've had, like I explained in the first class, small flashes of where I've seen a different side of reality. I don't understand why I've been able to see it, but where I literally, the veil's been pulled back and I've seen beings that I don't see appear, in this room right now. And there was a long time where I didn't understand what that was, and I didn't understand from a young person in terms of my childhood why I was seeing things that other people couldn't see. But now I understand that part of my mission was to understand and to jump into that knowledge so that I could be able to teach others about the things that I've seen and I've experienced. And that's part of guiding them along the path, okay? Now, in terms of our seventh point, your words are so powerful, so use them wisely, okay? What I mean by this, certainly from an internal standpoint, if we have that dialogue inside and we're cutting ourselves down, that is extremely damaging. Just stop it. It will attack your life. It will attack your experience. Now, when we're talking and interacting with others, also be very, very aware of what our words can do. A simple joke that is at somebody else's expense could lead somebody off on a tailspin that you have no clue of the trajectory of damage you could do, okay? So sarcasm, using people as an scapegoat or the butt of your jokes, it's not a high way of interacting or using your words. It may seem funny, it may seem a good use of your dialogue in the instant, but you don't know what that person has been through, and you don't know how deeply those words could affect them, okay? And if you have somebody that has gone through a lot of trauma or a lot of abuse or abandonment, and you hit a soft spot in them or something that is a trigger that's a deep pain, a simple word can wound them for years and can really throw them off of their purpose because they may really be attached to that. So again, just being very cognizant that everything that we say to others, if we can always use our highest good, and what I mean by that is lifting them up. It's the simplest thing. Complimenting them, telling them they're beautiful, telling them they're worthy, telling them that you value them, that their time is important, that, just even being in their presence, fills you up. I know it's difficult to try to start to use this dialogue. It's not a dialogue that we've used for a long time. There's been times in our history where, there's different Aboriginal peoples and different cultures that have utilized their dialogue very, very purposely and have augmented their whole cultural paradigm in their society. But in Western culture, we tend to use our words to tear each other down, to manipulate each other, and to sting. Sometimes there is complimentary verbiage that is being used. But a lot of times, again, it's quick, it's dirty, it's on to the next thing. There's not a lot of feeling or emotion behind it, and it's not well used. So again, as we go through this transformation process, we have to also learn to slow down. We've been sped up to the level of computer type thinking, and we're expecting ourselves to operate on this level. This is a complete disservice to our heart energy center. Our heart doesn't calibrate at that speed. Our heart is slow. Our heart is purposeful. Our heart, it has no time limits and it has no boundaries. So when you're really coming from that place, you're not in a rush. You're never rushing. So just starting to pay attention to that. I know it's difficult. We all have things that we have to do. We all have bills we need to pay. But there are things that we can cut out of this mad, race and maze that we've gotten ourselves into, so that at least we can learn to slow down a little bit, okay? Now, I'm not gonna go, I know we're kind of running a little bit at a time, so I'm gonna try to get through all of this if I possibly can tonight. The 8th point that we wanna start focusing on in terms of projection is, what are we actually projecting? What are we using our minds for that can create a beautiful reality? So identifying this, so really watching your thoughts in every moment, but then let's take it a step further and let's be very diligent about what our thoughts are. So when you have that downtime, using visualization and going into a place where we're creating reality in the most beautiful extension that our imaginations can imagine. What your connection to God, to the universe, to the quantum field, is your imagination. So the unseen that is talked about in all the esoteric texts is our imagination. That is the unseen. So utilize that for everything beautiful that you can create, because that's what you're learning to do. You're learning to touch intelligent infinity and become a creator of your environment. And when you do that with the highest purpose, it's never wrong. So what you create, so your imagination, the most beautiful forms that your imagination can create, that is your destiny. And so often we do ourselves a disservice. We say, there's no way, you have a daydream or you have something in your mind that you want to create, and maybe you allow yourself a minute to think about it, and then what do? You squash it, you push it away, you do whatever you possibly can to tell yourself you're not capable of it. The minute you do that, you're limiting God. You're saying, that which created all of this, the entire universe, is not capable of helping you with one small little goal? How can you make that decision? How can you make that small decision? How can you deduce the source of creation to that? And why should you? You can't limit yourself in that way. So one of the main secrets is opening up your mind and creating the most magical, wonderful plan for your life here on earth that you can possibly imagine. And if you can imagine it past that, go there. Why not? It's not going to hurt you. I can tell you the only thing it's going to do is give you beautiful mental, cinematic scenes that are only going to raise your vibration. And the reason that I know that it actually starts to manifest in the real world is before I had any of this, what do you think I did? I imagined it with every little last detail. I imagined this room with a great oval table and seats around it. I imagined the crystal chandeliers. I imagined white. I imagined it looking beautiful, a beautiful vista. Now, I didn't know how it was going to be created, and I didn't assume that, it was necessarily going to happen. All I did, there was no ego involved in it. I simply just let my imagination run wild and create my wildest dreams. And I didn't put any expectation on them. I wasn't entitled. I wasn't demanding. I was just daydreaming in the most beautiful form of a daydream that I could imagine. And that's continually what I do daily. When I take time to meditate, and this is where, again, my meditation is different than a lot of the meditation that I find is being taught. And so I don't want to say that I'm right or wrong. I'm just telling you what has worked somewhat for me. Okay, going into the absolute silence and experiencing nothingness doesn't work for me. It doesn't raise my vibration. What works for me in meditation is to take myself into the most beautiful fantasy you can ever imagine and to live it in my mind for a small period of time and recalibrate myself. And when I do that, I instantly come out of my meditation feeling so basically all encompassed by this vision that I can stay up all night long. I can write and write and write. Whatever it is, even if I find that I achieve 1% of what I've been visualizing, it's still so immense and grand, and I'm still blown away that any of it manifests. It's just that good. And so as you do this, and as this becomes your practice, you'll find that it's easier and easier and easier, and your brain starts to become a different sort of organism or mechanism. It just becomes this continual vibrational output of harmony, the symphony of what life could be. And the more minds that can start to create that kind of mirage, vibrational mirage through our internal world, you're going to start to see a transformation that is utterly incredible in our external world. So again, that's why teaching in any form will have a tremendous effect, more so than you ever believe. So helping that person that's homeless on the street, taking that time to help another person out, not creating categories around whether somebody is valuable or invaluable. Also not creating categories around life forms. Human beings are better than a cow, or human beings are better than an ant or a spider. That's not accurate. That's not the way the quantum field sees it. Because all pieces are needed to support life on Earth, every single piece is equally important. So that's, again, something that we have created in terms of our mental paradigm that is incorrect. we need to recalibrate, and we need to balance that distortion so that we understand the equilibrium that is life. If we want to have sustainability, and if we want to be part of that intelligent infinity, we have to get away from the idea that we are better than and that we can destroy because it's in our right. That's a principle that is been mistaught throughout the ages. You know, there's man and there's beast. No, it is not that way. That is never how Jesus intended it to be taught. That's not how it was supposed to be delivered to humanity. There is no segregation between life. No loving creator would ever create a vast array of beings and make one set of beings capable of destroying the rest with no regard for the calibration or the entirety of life. It is not a sound principle that any bedrock of love could stand strong upon. So again, we need to understand that distortions are embedded into so many different aspects of society, and we need to be intelligent enough to understand when a distortion is a distortion. You know, if you're coming to a farm and there's a family of pigs and the mother pig is watching the farmer chop off the head of the mother and squealing and crying, that pig is feeling something. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is at the stage where they want to become a vegetarian or a vegan, but eventually, as you go along your spiritual path, there's a reason why many of our leaders spiritually do not eat other animals. It's because you come to a point where life is so sacred and precious to you that you are able to forego taking another life for a momentary pleasure that you might have as a sense pleasure. That's, you know, again, to deduce it to that level, non-judgment. People are where they are. You can't judge them. You can't be angry at them, because if you're starting to basically transmit anger because of somebody's behavior, you're also distorting the whole principle. I used to eat hot dogs. I'm not a terrible person. I just didn't have that level of understanding. I didn't know yet. You don't know until you know. But then once you know, you can't unknow it, right? So again, we're all on this path of evolution, and part of understanding and non-judgment is just allowing people to be where they are and loving them for where they are, and then gently guiding and teaching them. The ninth principle in terms of correcting your own projection is observation and attention leads to understanding. So understanding that we need to be self-observant. And I really want you to understand that this is really for yourself. Now, you can definitely quickly observe in your environment if people are unaware or if they're really in the muck of their own distortions. That's fine, but don't judge it and don't put any attention onto it, because you'll spin out into a vortex that's completely off track. You can't fix them. You're not on their path, so just let it go. In terms of your own path and your own journey, just having that level of really becoming a scientist in terms of your own journey. Observe yourself, observe your thoughts, observe your actions, and have that ability to stand back and look at what you've done objectively, not getting mad at yourself, and just knowing where you could make those corrections. And then next time you're going to do it a little bit better, and then next time you're going to do it a little bit better. And that's how it becomes like second nature, and then it will actually become part of the way that you live your life. Now, again, having attention to these things, you don't want to go to the point that, well, I don't want to say you don't want to. Everybody has their path. But even in terms of spiritual seeking, you don't want to go into this like tumbleweed sort of a mentality where you're just in a craze to get this done as fast as you can, and you need to suck up all the knowledge as fast as possible. You really have eternity to figure this out. And again, I'm going to go into some of those principles so that eventually I can explain to you what eternity is, how the fact that, our human brains have a very difficult time with understanding what eternity actually means. That'll be another lesson. But just understanding that, oops, hopefully that's not on the video, but a little snag there. Caught my own boob. Okay, so, but in terms of just your journey. You have forever to get this done. So don't worry about it, but be diligent. And knowing that, again, when I say you have eternity, you're always going to be evolving. So don't become afraid of that concept either, because I think a lot of people will often say, well, you know, like they think there's a finish line, like they think there's a point where you're gonna have a cutoff, or you just sit back with a margarita in the sky and you float on a cloud for eternity. It doesn't work that way. It's ever evolving. Our intelligence is ever evolving. So there's never gonna be a point where you're not going to be engaged in what is in creation. Creation just is. You have to settle within yourself this idea that it just is. And the beauty and the mystery of that is what is. And it's that simple and it's that complicated all at once, okay? Now, the 10th truth in terms of really trying to understand our own projection is learning to transform your world by seeing everything and everyone as yourself. So when we start to look at the other people that we interact with, I do this with every being, every tree, every rock, every chair, even things that are inanimate, they're still part of the field. So I wouldn't go up and kick a rock. I know that sounds foolish to some of my friends that haven't gotten there yet, but to me, I still observe that rock as sacred. I still honor that piece of reality. So I'm going to be kind and I'm going to be good with everything that I interact with, whether it is a window pane or a flower or an ant or a human being or a dog, whatever it is. I look at it with the same love. There's love in all of it. And when you start to see that, like even when I'm swimming in my pool, I talk to the trees all the time. They're my friends. I just think, oh my goodness, I have all my friends standing around me. And again, I will do, whatever it is to talk to nature. And oftentimes when I've been in a state where I kind of touch another dimension of reality, and that's the only way that I can form it into words, when the colors become very, very bright, when I can really understand what the animals are saying. And I know this is going to sound really, really weird, but when I crossed over into those small segments in my life, I can actually communicate for a short period of time with the life around me. And it's life that normally doesn't communicate with us, but it's the most amazing. I can't even really put it into words, but I've experienced it enough that I know it exists. So I couldn't talk about it if I hadn't experienced it. And I can tell you from the reality that I experience now, which is equally useful, it's another level. There's a bliss and a warmth and a totality about everything. Every fiber, every molecule is alive, and it communicates with you and it dances with you in a way that we normally don't experience in third dimension, if that makes sense. So those experiences have allowed me to understand that there is another existence. And again, like I was speaking about in the first class, when I've had those experiences, when I can see other beings and communicated with them, I don't know if you would call them spirits. I didn't really experience it in that way as like dead people walking around. They were just very translucent entities, and they were very intelligent. They weren't like, in Ghostbusters where they're trying to beat people up, or they're just very peaceful entities, and they don't communicate verbally. It's all through telepathy, and it's just supportive, loving energy. So the thoughts are instantly transferred into your consciousness, and the only connections that I've had with them was to help support me and to give me guidance and information that I didn't have before encountering them. So again, some people will think that's a little weird. They haven't experienced it. There's nothing I can do but tell my own truth and say what I have experienced up to this point. Now, the 11th principle in terms of our projection is learn to view reality as eternal, okay? When you do that, you take the pressure off this 90 or 100-year period that you have to get everything done and you have to be perfect and you have to have the best body and have the nicest car, and breathe a little. You've got forever. That's the messages I have always gotten when I've connected to that higher power. And if you can just marinate in that and also realize that, again, that pod, the body that we're talking about that you're in right now, it's very elemental. It is a bunch of earth elements that have come together to create a vehicle for you, but it is not you. So don't judge it too harshly. We get so attached to the way it looks and the way it functions, or it's not working well, or it doesn't look like the other kind of bodies, or maybe it's the best body, or whatever it is. It's just a heap of food that has come together into this little, it's congealed into this form that you're utilizing right now, but it is not you. It's not the essence of what you are that is eternal. It's just a little form that you're borrowing, again, on this particular journey so that you can learn. And you are going to pop into all different sorts of bodies along your path, and you're going to learn different things from different bodies. If you're a dolphin, you're going to learn different lessons than if you're a human being. If you're an ant, you're going to learn different lessons than if you're a rock. If you're a rock, you're going to learn different lessons than the tree and the bird, okay? And so, again, these things are difficult to sometimes understand and really take into our essence when we are in a separate body. When we think of society at large, and especially media and everything that we experience in modern living, it also feels like fluffy and it doesn't translate into our modern day life. Don't worry about it. Do it anyways. Be who you authentically are, and you are likely part of this wave of change that's coming to planet Earth, okay? And that's a beautiful thing to be part of. And that doesn't mean that whatever is part of the old patterns, because again, it's just old programming, it's old patterns that are no longer necessary in terms of our evolution, our groups of souls' evolution. And make no mistake, at the very precipice of existence, that first initial existence, there are other souls that are going through the first stages that you and I went through at our very inception. So don't judge it, don't worry about it, just know that it's a process. Now, the 12th sort of principle that is extremely, extremely important in terms of your own projection is personal triggers. Anything that triggers you, pay close attention to it. A trigger is something that is not healed within yourself. It is a distortion that you carry, because once a trigger is healed, it can't trigger you. So anything that disturbs you, pisses you off, frustrates you, sends you on a tailspin, or an emotional kind of chaos, it is an unhealed part of yourself. So I don't suggest that you take all of your triggers and spread them out and try to tackle them all at once. That's very daunting. Pick one at a time and work diligently one at a time at each trigger. And then you'll find that they dissolve themselves and they are forgotten. Another piece of this that might be able to help you is our stories. We love to have our stories. Understand, our stories are attached only to this lifetime, and when this lifetime is over, that story is not really going to matter too much. It is like being at school. We will evaluate it, we'll see how we did, and then we're going to be on to the next journey. So, what I can tell you about your own story, if you tend to go over historical events in your past and replay them and try to change them and go over them again and trigger yourself over and over and over again on past hurts, you're really stuck in the mud. Stop that. whatever that tape that's playing in the background about your past, myself, things took a dramatic change for me when I turned off that playlist. I never bring up my past. It's not relevant. I'll utilize certain things in terms of trying to articulate my way through a situation, but I let it be my intuition and not this construction of my past that I'm projecting onto my current reality, if that makes sense. So really allowing yourself to turn that story off in your head of where you've come from, who you are, where you've been. You're not meant for greatness. Your dad was a coal miner, whatever it is. It doesn't matter, because it actually doesn't matter. And I think too that a lot of modern psychotherapy, unfortunately, has us replay all of that, and it just re-damages and it just relays the tracks of trauma. So when we think of our triggers, we really want to look at what we can personally fix, forgive whatever it is, let it go, even if it is the deepest, most uncomfortable pain we've ever had.